afternoon, good evening, or good night, depending on where you are in Australia. My name is Dante St. James, presenting to you tonight a look at proposals, quotes, bids, all those kind of things, and how to make them win. I think we all really want to make these kind of things win for us. So I've got a few principles that are going to make that a lot more clear for you. And we're also going to be looking at a couple of different programs that can help to make the whole proposal thing a lot easier to track and a lot easier to get in the right format for your particular kind of customers. Let's get underway, share that screen and get this show on the road. Let me get the screen share first. It's always that awkward part where I just about get it right and then completely stuff it up. Look, I've got it this time. So how to write quotes and proposals that win new business. A bit of a quote here from one of my favorite female entrepreneurs from America, Catherine Delahaye Payne, who said, the moment you make a mistake in your pricing, you're eating into your reputation and your profits. And this is particularly applicable in the world of quotes, because if you're not quoting the right amount of money, then you're kind of making a big mess and potentially either leaving money on the table or not even giving a client a chance to accept your proposals and your quotes. And you might be pricing yourself in or out of a mess. There's so many things you can do wrong when it comes to quoting. So hopefully we'll have enough info in here to help you to make better decisions about that. It's presented by Business Station and the Digital Solutions Program, which is an initiative of the Australian government. And we will be recording this. So if you do have to drop out to, I know, pick up kids or eat dinner or get something out of the oven or whatever you're doing at this time of the afternoon or evening, don't worry, we'll have it on YouTube for Business Station probably around 2 days' time. I usually rip these out just after I finish and put them online as well. So through my own channel. So either search myself or Business Station and you'll be able to see this. And if you're attending tonight, live on Zoom, not only do you get this sent to you at the end of it, but you'll also be able to chat, ask questions, just participate live in here to let me know if there's things you want clarified or if there's something you want me to go over one more time. What we're going to look at is quotes and proposals and what they are. And I've got a bit of a definition run through quotes and proposals and bids and the other one I'm looking at, quotes, proposals, bids, and estimates is the other one, and what the difference is between them and how you might use them in different circumstances. We'll look at what the must-have sections of a quote are, because quotes are really the center of what we do in Australia. What really tends to make some quotes never seem to win. We'll look at some thoughts around pricing and how to make sure you're pricing the right way. And I'm going to show you a demo of Quotient, Quoters, and Proposify as 3 specific quoting systems that you may or may not find any use for, but hey, it's always worth having a look under the hood as how these things work and what some of the better quoters out there happen to be using in their system breakdown. Bit about me, education through the University of New South Wales and University of Western Sydney a very long time ago. Gosh, that's like in the 90s. It was still like a 19 in front of the year. That was a very long time ago. But more recently, I've done a lot of stuff with LinkedIn, Facebook, the Chartered Institute of Marketing. I'm a Facebook lead trainer and digital marketing associate, plus a bunch of other badges I won't go into. But I also work in a group called Startup Territory, which is all about, it's a little startup of my own, which is a group running a pre-accelerated program in the Northern Territory. And eventually that will be spreading to a lot beyond the Northern Territory as well, working with entrepreneurship facilitators, another government program helping with startups. And I'm a training partner for Be Connected with the Australian government and the Google Digital Springboard program. You've probably never heard of it. It's a really fun one. Quoting well means mastering the art of preparing your quote, presenting your quote, and then responding to your customer after your quote is accepted. Developing these quoting skills will help you win work and build your customer base. That's not just me reading off a screen. That's actually the core competencies that come with quoting. Preparing a good quote, presenting a good quote to your customer, making sure you have some sort of follow-up with that after they've accepted, specifically after they're accepted, because that's where things can get so very lost. And then making sure that you develop these skills as you go along in your business, because this is what's going to help you to win work. It's going to help you to build a customer base. So quoting is an art. It really is. So what we're going to look at is a bit of a a bit of a look at what all these terms mean. What's a quote? What's a proposal? What's an estimate? What's a bid? How are they different? How are they the same? What are you most likely to use? And it's a bit of like the Wizard of Oz running through there and being scared of lions and tigers and bears, oh my. Instead, we've got all these buzzwords that we've got to work past to figure out what they actually mean and how they apply to us. So first of all, proposals, estimates, quotes, and bids, while they're similar and have a lot of the same kind of things going on, they're not actually the same. In some cases, some of them are not legally binding documents, where some are legally binding documents, specifically after they've been accepted by a client. So looking at what they are, proposal provides a lot of detail. It focuses on more showcasing of the value you're going to offer as opposed to just a cost. Quite often when we put a proposal through, we treat it almost like it's a bid for a bit of government work, which we're trying to find the cheapest way of doing something, where a proposal may not even focus on the cost at all, but it proposes a system or a service or a bundle of services. And in that, you'll provide lots of down-grained, like very, very precise information. It can be all about the value that you deliver. It can be about the benefits rather than just the features of what you're delivering. It's usually multiple pages long. The proposal, when I'm doing it for a client at the moment, could go on for up to 30 pages, depending on the size of that project. Generally, if they're going to be paying a lot more for it, they get a lot more proposal out of me. Now, proposal can act as a quote. It actually can, and that quote can be accepted and then sent off and becomes an invoice. So a proposal and a quote often are the same thing, but I will change in between. If it's a very basic thing, I won't create a proposal, I'll create a quote, because those things that are in there don't need a lot of explanation, because this client is probably well educated in what the services are that are being provided. Whereas a proposal can be more for someone who maybe not has such a great in-depth knowledge of what it is you do and how you do it and why. And you can showcase yourself in a lot more detail. So it's like an estimate and a quote, and you'll see what they are shortly. It really looks at things like, again, that value. What is the value you're offering to a client? What's perhaps the unique value you're offering that's not offered by others who maybe they may be getting a quote off? It may contain things like testimonials and examples of the past work you've done that helps to establish trust. In a proposal, you've got lots of space, lots of time, lots of detail you can go into to ensure that someone really truly understands what it is you're doing and how you're of benefit to them. Now, that's different to an estimate. An estimate is more like an approximation, and it gives a client a bit of a ballpark idea of what to expect. And this is something which is much more common in, say, building projects, which are not yet at that quoting phase, or where there could be variable costs. Now, estimates are affected a lot by, approximate costs. So they would be something like, we know that at the current fuel prices, that the cost of this logistics transit system may be $1,000 an hour. But if fuel prices go up, that could become easily $1,500 per hour because of the fuel that's used. It will have a list of the services you were going to provide. It'll even go into the depth of a scope of the work, so you'd understand that this is what's included, this is what's not included. If it's a major project, like for instance, if you're doing a complete replumbing of an entire apartment block, you can say, yes, we will plumb the apartment block, but we're not plumbing the individual units within it. That's what a scope of work is. It excuse me, it'll often include things like timelines and completion dates that are expected from a project, where a quote doesn't necessarily have to contain timelines. It will have things like the exclusions. This is not included in this quote or this estimate. So it can go into that detail about it. And it often has terms and conditions. Now, all these things can live inside a quote as well, as you're about to see. A quote is more concrete, and it specifies a fixed dollar value for a fixed time frame. So for instance, you're going to pay $6,000 for this project and it will be finished by the 30th of June 2022. That's more like what a quote is. It's something that basically they can quote you on. Now, there's some argument about whether a quote is valid if it's a verbal conversation. Legally, there's not much difference between a verbal agreement and a written agreement, but in legal terms, you still have to prove that that verbal agreement actually was made. And that's really hard for someone to prove. Whereas a written quote that has everything laid out on it, which has concrete dollar value, you will pay this and often pay no more. A estimate will say, well, it's going to be from this. So this is what we expect it to be. But once the cost of tools and labor comes in, that may change. But this is an estimate of what you could expect to pay. And a lot of large corporations will work with estimates. They'll have their budget. They'll usually have enough fat in the budget to cover overruns from that estimate. Whereas a quote is something that we as small businesses probably deal with a lot more. We want to know how much and when. And because we're dealing often with other small businesses, they've got a lot more control over that. So they're able to go, well, I know how much my contractor costs me. I know how much my materials are going to cost. The price of fuel between now and next week is not going to double. So I can pretty much keep some control over that. That's the difference with a quote. It's very much a quote. It's something which you said, this is how much. It's usually for a fixed time period, 30 days, or it's going to be a 14-day build, or it's going to be 3 sessions that we're going to work on. It is legally binding once it's accepted. So a quote is not legally binding until the client has accepted it. Now, again, there's some legal hazy areas here where it says, well, a quote is really only legally binding for the customer to pay, not necessarily for you to deliver. But the law also frowns upon businesses that don't deliver what they promise they're going to do. And it may come after you've sent things like proposals and estimates. So you might go, here's my proposal for what I'd like to do. And they go, oh yeah, so how much do you think that's going to cost? Then you send back an estimate based upon the contents of that proposal. And then they say, okay, great. So we're ready to go and start in 30 days. Now give me a quote on what it's actually going to cost. And then you send back a quote based upon that proposal, which made them go, wow. Based upon the estimate, made them go, yeah, that's within our budget. Now a quote goes out with exactly what's going to be paid, when it's going to be paid, and things like, for instance, when you expect it to be paid and the way you want it to be paid. Bids go into infinitely more detail, and this is where you're starting to work with tenders. So bids are a lot more detail than an estimate and a quote, and they're very common in building and in construction and in very major projects. It's usually when you're bidding for something that the government is putting out as a project. Now, companies will bid for projects by specifying how much it's going to cost to complete it. So the scope is usually provided by the government. They say, this is what we need to get done. Here's all the detail you need to know. Now you will bid for this, and we're going to accept the bid based upon various criteria. That could be price, that could be inclusion of Indigenous owned businesses. It could be buy local agreements, which say we've got to use a certain amount of local businesses to do this. So local businesses will get an advantage if it's in a Queensland government contract. They will prefer to use Queensland owned and tell us how much it's going to cost. They're not asking for you to propose. They're asking for you to work on the same requirements that all bidders have, to work on the same level ground that all the other bidders have. So it tends to be obviously for government contracts and tenders more than anything else. Local government, state government, territory government, and Australian government tends to be where you'll see most of these things pop up. In Australia, we mostly expect to, as individuals, as consumers, and as small business, to deal with quotes. So there's going to be a little bit of, so a tender, great question, Shamli. A tender is usually a statement of work that, say, a government wishes to have done. So they might say, we are putting out a tender for someone to build a bridge over the Avon River. And to build that bridge over the Avon River, it must have these requirements in it. So we need to know of all the companies out there who can build this for us, bid for that work. And what happen, the companies will bid for that tender. They'll bid for that piece of work. So that's generally what it is. You see it very much so. Like recently, there was a tender for the job that I do, for instance, that was put out by government saying, as an entrepreneurship facilitators and self-employment support experts, we want to know what companies and small businesses out there would like to tender for, to bid for this tender that we have going out for people to fulfill this role in lots of places around Australia. So in that, I have to work with Business Station to fill in the details of our bid for that tender. So we find out at some point whether we get that or not, and that affects then whether we continue that program or we don't continue that program. So the same happens with all these government programs. At some point, we've all had to bid for a tender to get that work and be paid for it. So there's a bit of a balancing act you're going to have in Australia where you might have to work with what the client expects to receive and also work with what you're willing to provide. You're a small business. You don't always have the luxury of time to be learning how to write a proposal, I'm losing my words again, a proposal, a bid, a estimate, or a quote. So quite often what we really know we're asking for is a quote. When someone asks you for an estimate, they're usually looking for a quote. They're asking for a proposal. They're usually asking for a quote as well. They really want to know ultimately how much that thing is going to cost them. So if we're providing quotes, then what do we need to put in them? What is needed to be included in a quote? What are the parts? What are the bits of info that need to go in there? First of all, there's client information. So it sort of starts off with client information. I've got an example at the end that will show you what a quote kind of looks like. Client information includes the business name, the address, the phone number, fax, if people still use those. I don't know of anyone who uses the fax anymore, the email address. So all that contact details of that client. It may also include their ABN or Australian business number in there as well, if you think that that's important to have. Bear in mind though, that their ABN is not required on a quote because we don't quite know what part of their business may be asking for this quote. They may have 15 different business names and lots of different business structures, and one of those may be that's against their ABN is looking for that. So probably maybe leave the ABN out, just get the name, address, phone number, email address, the contact person, and even their title in there to make sure you've got all the information you need in there. The second thing we need is your information of your business, because they need to know who they're dealing with. So that's where you will include a business name, all the same details, your name, your title, if you have one. But it's absolutely vital that you include your Australian business number. Your ABN tells that person you are a business that can be worked with. You're an official business, and particularly if you're GST registered, there's a lot of people who will not deal with you unless you are GST registered. So bear that in mind, that sometimes when you go to put in a quote for some work, some people won't work with you, or some businesses won't work with you unless you are GST registered. Now, if you're working for individuals, that's usually not a problem. They don't care whether they're paying GST or not. In fact, it might be the opposite way. They might go, because they feel like that if they want to claim that on their business, they need to be able to claim the GST they're paying. So they expect that you would actually be charging GST as well. Getting to the point of GST, as you probably know, is that $75,000 a year level and above. That's when you do a GST, but you can get away with not, and Shamali is asking this as well, is you don't have to be registered for GST. You can be a sole trader and you can be just a service that's just operating under your name. Absolutely, you can do that. Just bear in mind though, that sometimes when you're going to work for things like government, if you're doing pitching for a bit of work from government, bidding for a tender, for instance, you will have to be GST registered. That's going to be mandatory for that. But if you're just working for individuals, they won't care. It won't matter at all. Next up, we need to include a quote number. So this could be a specific reference number that your system you're using may use, or it may not. Sometimes if you're quoting, for instance, when I need to do an invoice number that's outside of my invoicing system and has to be done manually on, say, an Excel spreadsheet, I'll make up the invoice number. The invoice number will usually be date-based. So it'll be like today's date, 14/03/2022A or something like that. So I'll base it upon what the date is, so that it sort of makes sense to me, gives them a number to work with, which they need in their systems, particularly if you're working, doing some work for a business. You can do the same thing when you're putting your quote number. Your quote number can be 001. It could be 3 cats plus 1 mice. It can be whatever your number, what you want to have. But it's important for businesses who are then using it to claim things like GST and claiming the cost of your services on their tax to have a quote number. Their accountants will ask for that. And if you don't have that, well, then you need to do it. Amanda's asking, are bids and tenders legally binding once accepted? Well, that's something which, you could go to court over that kind of thing against the government, but I don't know necessarily whether you're going to win that court battle. But they tend to be, once a tender is allocated to a winning bid, then that becomes a binding thing, and then all the operation of that tender and the operation of that program with government, or that construction project, will be then allocated to you. Now, there will be lots of clauses in what they're offering. So when you come back with a winning bid and they say, yep, you've won, here's the contract. And then the contract is going to be all based around you and your contract to them and their contract to you. So they'll be going, okay, it must be completed in a certain amount of time, or it's usually all these things are stated up front. So if there is a major change in the contract that's offered as to the tender that you were made aware of, so for instance, they said, actually, this needs to be now completed in 2 months, not 6 months, then you have the option to be able to pull back out of that and say there's been a dramatic change of circumstances there, and they'll allocate another winner. But that very rarely would happen. Remember, you're dealing with governments here. They don't like changing anything. They just want to just go down the same path that we've all gone down to make it as easy as possible to work with. So this is just this quote number is just a tracking number, I guess, that it lets them separate out your quote from everyone else's quote. You'll include the date of issue. That's a quote that it was created and sent. Look, I would lean towards making the date of issue the day that you sent it, not the day that you made it up, because you might have started putting together that quote about 3 days ago. And what happens is that if you've got a requirement in there that says the quote price is only valid for 30 days, and you've got to decide whether that's 30 days from the date that's showing on the quote, which may be 3 days ago, which means 27 days, or that means 30 days from the actual like the sending of that quote, which might have been 3 days later. So it's 30 days from then. So to make it really clear, I would lean towards making it things like the send date is the date of issue, the date that you actually sent it out to that client. And then use full numbers, so there's no confusion whatsoever. That's the most important thing you're going to learn about quoting, is it has to be crystal clear. So you're talking about them 14 March 2022 or 14/03 2022, really, really clear. Not just 14th March, not just March 2022. It's got to be the full date of when it was sent. And tend to make it so that your validity date, so if you say this quote is valid until the 30th of April, make sure that you've got a date of validity, or you say this quote is valid 30 days up until 30 days after the issue date. So they then go, what's the issue date? Oh, it's the 14th of March. Great. So 30 days from then, we're cool. We're within that period. Just make it really super easy for them to know what your conditions are when it comes to your pricing. Next, we do the fun part, which is the products and services. So these are line items that are going down the list and saying, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. Now, it can be really, really tempting to bundle everything into, say, if you're doing, let's just say, a garden design. So you go garden design services and you've got a price. Customers really prefer, and I know businesses absolutely prefer this, when you break down those costs. So you go initial consultation, $110, second consultation, $90, third consultation, $85, and you have like the dates that they're set on. Then you go first draft of the plan for the garden, this one. So they've got a price on that. So you break down each line item to make sure that it's really easy to understand what exactly they're getting in there, because you've got to assume that people don't know anything about what you do and they don't normally understand what it is you do. And include things like product numbers. If you've got products that you sell and you've got SKU numbers, stock keeping units, or any sort of numbers like that, include those on there, because that makes it really easy for them to then maybe shop around a bit. If there's you selling a certain range of goods that other people sell and they're all the same brand, the same thing, then there's numbers associated with that, then it's very easy for people to do price comparisons. And you do actually want to make it easy for people to do this, because if you don't, they just put aside your quote and they go, you're making it too hard. They won't consider it. It's not being, you might think you're being tricky and going, well, if I don't give the price, if I don't give the stock keeping unit on there, then they won't be able to compare me to others and they'll choose me. You've got to make it easy for people to compare with you, because they just discount you altogether and they just throw out your quote. Include the quantities. Maybe even break down your labor costs. So for instance, if you've got a difference between, say, you're making, I use this example quite a lot, scented candles. So you're going, okay, this is the cost of the scented candles, and this is the cost of the labor to produce the scented candles, particularly if they are custom ones that are not just off the shelf from your regular range. Next up, we're looking at the terms and conditions, and this is where things get a little bit funny with legalese, I guess. There are some limitations on what you might be quoting for. So, for instance, if you're including your quote to be $16,000 for this piece of work, but it must all be finished by the 16th of March, then you're going, well, what happens after the 16th of March when there's extra work that needs to be done? You're then making it clear that, well, after the 16th of March, we've done our work. If there's extra work you need because you want to add different things and make changes and variations, then that's going to cost you. And this is how much extra it's going to cost you at a daily or an hourly rate. And also what conditions will extra work be required under? If you say, you could say no extra work will be continued in after the delivery of the project, or you might say extra work will be done under the condition of fresh quotes being made for that extra work to be done. Or you might want to say that there's some conditions about how you want to be paid. For instance, you might want to be paid by bank transfer, by credit card. You might want 50% upfront and 50% on completion. There's lots of different conditions you may have in there. You might even have clauses about weather. It's just started raining outside for me now. So particularly if you're doing something that's outdoors and is affected by rain, then you might want to go, look, for every day of rain, that will delay the project by an extra day. So to make it very clear to people, one that's very common with people who are doing services, particularly on computers. So there might be graphic designers, web designers, even artists may say, have a clause that says, in the event that the client chooses to make adjustments to the project while it's happening, that will delay it by this time and increase the cost by this. So you say, if it delays it by a day, then the cost per day of extra to do those changes will cost $750 a day, or whatever the cost is that covers your hourly rate for the amount of work you have to do to make those changes that the client didn't really agree to when you first put your quote in there. So you can add all these things, and it's important to do them and to define them. So not just for legal coverage, even though legal coverage is important, it's more so it's really clear to both you and the customer what the expectations are, what their responsibilities are, and what your responsibilities are. Next up, we're going to put in some notes. This is where you've got the nice stuff. So there can be things like, we expect this to be done here. We're going to begin milestone 1 or item 1 will be done by this date. Item 2 will be done by this date. You can summarize your scope. So you can say, this is a little bit about the scope of the project. So you could be saying, whilst we're working on your home, we're working on your bathroom only, but not on your kitchen. Because some people can think that while you're there, you should be doing some other work for them too. It's raining really heavily outside. You probably can't hear it, so I've got a filter on my microphone that stops you hearing it. But I can barely hear my own voice right now. It's so heavy outside. And you can put in something like team member introductions. I know that when I'm doing quotes for work that involves grant payments, that I have to introduce the people who actually will be working on it. So I'll say, yes, I'm working on it as the project manager. Joshua is going to work as a web developer, and Prerak is going to work as the social media marketing person. You might include a thank you, like thank you for asking us to quote for you, and things like looking forward to working with you. All those kind of nice add-ons are really great to be including when you're running those quotes. Now we go into those optional details, and this is where you have lots of extra info, like the customer's ABN. You have to include your ABN. That may be the customer's ABN. It might be things like purchase order numbers. So if you're working with a business and they say, oh, we need a PO number for this, because they've already maybe sent you a purchase order to say, yes, we want to do this. Here's the number that you're going to be working on. It could include things like discounts or incentives. So for instance, you say, if you pay by this time, you will get a 25% discount. And it's nice to have a signature panel too, even though most quotes these days are done digitally, and they like click a button or they reply by emails, which is an email trail for you to prove that they've actually accepted that. Having a signature panel on there is a nice touch too, because they can sign that and send you back to you. So you've always got this hard copy you can file away that's got, what we call a wet ink version. And then they've got a copy of that for themselves as well. So there's lots of stuff you need to include in there. A quote is basically going to look a little bit like this. So you can see we've got our company name up there. We've got the address, we've got the phone number, even they put in there they're prepared by a particular salesperson's name. The date, the quote number is in there, the valid until number. The customer ID just might be an ID if you've got a system like Xero or something where you've got a client ID. Not that necessary. There's some terms and conditions. There's a space there for signing. And what you'll notice in the description area is that you've got this very well-defined what each item is listed. So it's broken down and itemized so that the client can know exactly what they're getting and how much each of those sections costs. And that's pretty good when you're offering things like options. So for instance, I'm putting together a website. I say, okay, here's the website. Now, if you need web hosting, here's another option. If you need a domain name, here's another option. If you want to do this in WordPress, this is how much extra it'll cost as opposed to working on Wix. So you have all these little options, and in the right systems, like some of the ones I'll show you shortly, those systems will have those options ready for you. You can make it an optional extra. So the quote becomes customizable for the client. So they can go, yes, I want that. Yes, I want that. Oh, no, I don't need the extra mobile phone number. No, I don't need an NBN connection. I just want the website and I want the hosting, and that's it. And because they've already got the domain. So they're only making a quote that suits their particular circumstances. That's a really good way of actually increasing your average revenue per customer, is to offer them optional extras. In my quotes, I always offer other products that I do. So for instance, if I'm selling a website to someone, I offer them a mobile phone plan at a very discounted rate and an NBN connection plan at a discounted rate. Now, sometimes I sell it, sometimes I don't. But one of the things I do add onto my website is saying, hey, I'll create you 12 months of social media posts based upon this formula for X amount of dollars. And I tell you now that a $4,000 or $5,000 website can get an extra $1,500 to $2,000 on top of that by someone suggests to select that and go, hell yeah, I want the 12 months worth of social media posts from someone who actually works for a social media company. I'll take that. Thank you very much. So that's one of the things you can offer and your extras. Just make it so that people can then choose it. And to do that, you can't really do it in a hard system like Microsoft Excel, for instance, where everything is printed out to a PDF and it's like they're signing a piece of paper. It can really only be achieved when you're using systems like the ones I'm going to show you shortly. So there's the kinds of quotes that never win are the ones that are going to be subjected to these kind of problems. The first one is when you go into way too much over explaining your price. It's when you start justifying your price. There's one thing I've learned when it comes to price is that your price is your price. And you don't really need to be wobbling around that price. Now, if you want to set your price and you know it's going to be a bit more expensive than others, just set your price. You don't have to explain it. It should be well known that you are a premium service or a premium product, as opposed to the other things that people could buy with that money. That should already be known by the time they get you. That could be in their proposal, for instance, not so much in a quote. In a quote, you state your price and you walk away. You don't go, it costs this much because we use this kind of quality materials and this kind of supply, which costs more to get, and we have to import the marble from Italy. Don't go explaining why the price is the price. The price is the price because you may be more expensive or cheaper than others, but your price is your price. Don't over explain it, because that's when it becomes a bit awkward and looks like you're trying to justify your pricing. They don't care about that. If they're in it for the price and you're more expensive than others, they're never going to choose you anyway. Stay away from too much technical jargon. I try to keep things as simple as I possibly can, particularly in the world like of SEO, which I do a lot of SEO reviews and a lot of SEO work. And SEO, search engine optimization, it's the art of making your website show higher on Google. That's about as technical as I need to explain it. You've got to understand that most of us read and write at the level of someone who's about year 7 in high school. So we never really move much beyond that. Most of our day-to-day communications is at that level. So your quotes also need to be at that level, unless you are someone who is in a technical realm talking to another technical person. then you may get a bit more in the jargon going on. But the minute you start talking about the kinds of things that they don't understand, you start to lose them, and they don't really understand what they're getting, and they don't want to appear dumb. So they're not going to ask you what those things are, unless there's someone who just doesn't care what you think of them. But a lot of people feel like, oh, I can't really ask that because it makes me look dumb, and they'll think that I'm stupid, and then they think they'll can rip me off. And just leave the technical jargon out unless it's absolutely necessary to differentiate your product against others, and particularly if you're talking to another technical person. When your proposal or anything has too much about you and not enough about them, you're in a real danger zone. A quote should also always be about what they're going to get, not what about you're going to give. And that may sound like this is the same thing. What you're going to give is what they're going to get, right? Same thing. Well, not necessarily. When the language used is about the benefits of what they will get if they choose this, and about the better life they'll have, or the better work they'll have, or the more money they'll make because of this, it's far easier to explain than you just going, we produce this because we are the best at this because. When you start talking about yourself too much, you tend to lose people because they're not really in it to hear about you. They're in it to hear about what's in it for them. So there's the whole language that comes around this, using the story brand technique and storytelling techniques and a little bit of psychology can really help you in there. So I encourage you to try and use the word your, you, your, and yours, rather than we, I, all that sort of thing. Rather, I will provide, we will provide. Talk about what they're going to get. To try to swing that language around from rather than what you're going to give them to what they're going to get. And it can be things like, instead of talking about cost, talk about investment. So the cost, it's in the cost, it's an investment in your business. It may seem like psychobabble, but this sort of stuff has been working for a long time to help different quotes and bids stand out amongst the crowd. You also, just like the jargon, don't want to be using unclear language that makes no sense. I find a lot of coaches do this. They're always talking about you'll be empowered and universal consciousness will, your universal consciousness session which will empower you to do greater things. Doesn't mean anything to anyone. Have your package, have your pricing, have your statement of what your product is, and make it very clear what they're going to get. 3 1-hour sessions of addressing your blockages so you can have a better life sounds better than 3 universal harmony sessions to unclog your chakras. It just sounds really unclear, and it starts to sound really, unless you're in the area where that makes sense to you, and that's the kind of language you respond to, that kind of stuff can be really big turn off to someone who may be coming to you because they think what they're going to do is have a better life, better relationships, and a better business. And they get told that they're going to be learning about chakras and crystals. It may not be what they're actually getting into this for. So be very clear with the language you're trying to use in there. So try not to get too woo, even if you're selling woo. There's an opportunity in every quote, and that opportunity is to win. But it's also an opportunity to do a little bit more. Some of those opportunities will be the opportunity to be competitive, the opportunity to show that you're professional, the opportunity for you to aim for better profitability in your business. After all, a quote is about the money you're going to be bringing in. It's part of your sales pipeline. It can be also about offering what you do at the right price. There's an opportunity for you to be strategic about your pricing, not just looking at how much money you can get for that work, but pricing yourself into a certain marketplace. And one of the big ones is that something like a quote is an opportunity to lower your legal risk, because when you're clear in a quote and you've got the right stuff in the quote and it's very, very clear to both you and the customer what they're going to get, then there's less of a chance of it being misrepresented or misunderstood. So we want to make sure we do lower your legal risk as much as we can. So let's look at the competitive side of it. You will learn over time that you will win certain quotes and you'll lose certain quotes, and you'll start to see patterns in the ones you win and patterns in the ones you lose. Now, I had an issue about 2018, 2019, where I was winning every single quote. It doesn't matter what I was going for, I was winning it all. And I very quickly got that overwhelmed And then when I looked at it and went, okay, I need to hire people to help me, I didn't have enough margin in there to pay for people to help me. It was completely based on my hourly rate as an individual person, but I'd overloaded myself. I actually did it again early this year when I lost staff to COVID and the Great Resignation. So what you need to do is understand that if you're winning every single quote you put out there, you might be a bit too cheap, because people get a cheap deal if they can. Some people are a lot more smart than that, and they'll go, I don't trust this quote because it's way too cheap and I don't think they'll be able to deliver, which is the case of a lot of sole traders, where they'll just go, oh, this is so much cheaper than anyone else. Oh, I don't really feel very confident that they're actually going to be able to deliver what they said they're going to deliver. The other thing might be that if you're losing every quote that you're putting out there, you might be a little too expensive. So you do have to do a bit of research and finding out whether you are in the market average or above the average or below the average, or 1,000% above the average, as some people like to put their time at a certain level. And as you'll find over time, your rate will go up. As you start to specialize in the particular kinds of clients, you want to actually price yourself out of the range of some people, because some people are tire kickers, some people are just going to be high maintenance for low profit. And this is a business and not a charity. So you want to make sure you're competitive, but you're still making money. A good looking quote is generally representative of a good looking business. So you need to have a very easy to read, easy to print, and easy to accept quote. The systems I'm going to show you shortly are very much that. If you want to accept a quote, you click a button and it sends back a notification saying this quote's been accepted, and it tells you when and how and what it is and any questions that that person may have. Digital quotes do this very much. They help you to have a very professional image. In some cases, they produce a website that people can read about their particular project, which is fantastic to be able, when you think about it, or produce like a portfolio document that they can read and print out. It looks beautiful. So some of these systems will do that, but the ultimate thing is to make it so it's easy for someone to read your quote, easy for someone to print it out if they want to, and easy for them to accept the quote without having to call you or necessarily having to sign physical documents, because a physically signed document with wet ink on it isn't any more legally binding than a digitally signed document these days, because I could fake anyone's signature if I wanted to really try hard enough. Anyone could. You just get a pen out and you sign a piece of paper. It doesn't really necessarily mean anything these days. Next up, when you want better profitability, quotes help you, and quoting systems particularly help you stay accountable to the health of your business. They help you to maintain that profitability, because it helps you to look at all your quotes, particularly in a system like the ones we're going to look at. You'll be able to monitor the pricing you're offering to make sure you're not going up and down depending on who the client is, or goes, oh, I like them, or oh, she's a single mother, I should charge her less, and that sort of thing. That's the sort of stuff that gets you in trouble, because you're not staying consistent with your pricing, so things become unpredictable in your business. You'll then start to see things like the effect of discounting. My first employee set up a spreadsheet for me, which was basically my pricing guide. For every single product I did, it put into account every cost that could come up as part of that, my hourly rate and all that. And it had actually said, here, this is the minimum price you should charge. Here's the best price you can charge. It gives you a really, really good margin. And then it gave me an opportunity to provide discounts. So I'll type in, okay, 10% discount. Then I'd see on that sheet what damage a 10% discount actually does. And I'd see that discount over a year and see what that actually does to me. And it made me thought, whoa, really got to stop discounting. These 25% discounts I'm offering, they need to stop right now. So these systems help you, along with things like Xero and MyOb and all those financial systems and invoicing systems, to track your margin and track your profitability. You also need to be realistic with your pricing. Now, these systems provide you with templates that can put the pricing in for you, so you can know that you're not making up things. You just got, this is the cost as I've been calculated. Every 6 months, I recalculate my pricing according to the cost of living, the cost of producing what I produce, all that sort of stuff. It has the pricing in there already, and any of the calculations that need to be in there are already automated for you. So you're not having to add it up on a calculator and realizing you didn't carry the one, and you end up like one less zero on there. So you're about to get seriously ripped off in your own business. These are helping you to make sure your price is always set to a point which is going to make you money, keep you profitable. It's going to give you enough margin between what your costs are and what you charge to enable you to be able to live on what you're going to make out of your business. And finally, the lowering your legal risk. When things are on paper, it's all in the open, or when things are on an email, it's all in the open. Once the client accepts your terms and conditions as quoted, they've accepted that. There's no gray areas. Everyone understands their responsibilities. And if you've been particularly clear in your terms and conditions and your scope and what they're going to get for that money and what the timelines are, then there's less for them to argue on. And there's also keeps you accountable. It keeps you to a timeline, to a cost. You can't just go, I want to go on holiday this year, so sorry, you're going to have to pay $10,000 more for this project now. They're going, well, I actually agreed to pay this for the project, not an extra $10,000. And that's when things go into arbitration and court. Now, usually if it's a really ridiculous amount of money, yeah, you're going to win that. But if it's just something because of something you've done, well, then despite what you might have agreed to, if you've changed the nature of that project or changed the nature of that product, and it no longer fits within what they originally quoted for, well, then they have a legal ground to actually charge you more to cover off the changes that you're going to make. So just get everything clear, and it makes it a lot easier for everyone to understand what they're going. Now, some of the thoughts around pricing I'll do before we show you these systems quickly would be around making sure you're profitable. You absolutely have to make sure that every quote is a profitable quote. You are not working for a charity. You are not working for free. You're working to support your life, to pay your bills, to pay your mortgage, to pay for that next holiday, to put the kids through school, to put food on the table. You have to maintain a profit margin. You have to be realistic. The market will impact your rate, but at the same time, if everyone's paying $10 for something that costs $20, that's a market you do not want to be in, because you can't afford to be losing $20 on everything you sell. You also need to be honest. No one's going out here, I'm assuming, to rip people off. If you're looking to rip people off and you're looking to scam people, it's a big path to failure, and you will get caught out and you won't have a great reputation. So if you want things to be profitable, make sure you cover your costs, plus your time, plus your margin. So you're going to have the cost of building whatever you need to build, plus you then have to pay for your time working on this and the time of any of your labor working on this. Then you have to have a margin. Now, food and beverage and hospitality usually runs around about a 30% margin. So there's all those costs are covered. Then it's 30% on top is the profit for the business. Web developers, though, we may charge up to 200% because we often make that money once and we never make it again. We don't have return customers as such. Once you've got a website, you've got a website. You don't necessarily need another website. So the margin may be as big as 200% on top of what the costs are. So you're then covering the fact that you keep needing to go back and market to get yourself more customers again and again. No competitors and high demand means often you can raise your margin a bit. So if you're the only person in town doing what you do and there's a lot of demand for what you do, you can raise your margin, but you don't want to get to the point where you're price gouging. We don't want to price gouge because that just leaves a really nasty taste in people's mouths. But if you've got many competitors and there's not much demand for what you're doing, your margin's probably going to have to come down a bit. What you want to do is match your price to the kind of person you're going with. So for instance, if you're targeting people who are quite wealthy and have a high disposable income and are quite happy to spend that income, well, you know, that's where you'd probably need to, that's where you would, that's where you aim your pricing at, to be matching that kind of person. But if, for instance, you're going for people who are living on government benefits and they tend to buy things, you know, very, very often, you might want to, you know, have a price that matches whoever you happen to be trying to sell this to. Price gouging, don't do it. Setting out to rip people off, just don't do it. You're going to be out of business way before they end up being affected by it. So what I'm going to do now is look under the hood of a few systems. The first one called Quotient, the second one called Proposify, which is really hard to say when you're tired, and Quoters. So let's have a look at them and see what some of those are going to be like. Now, see how they might suit you. Now, Quotient is $29 US a month, unfortunately. It's actually built in New Zealand. So I wish they were New Zealand dollars, because that would be a lot better than a $29 US cost for one team member. There's no free one. You can do a trial. You can cancel at any time. Now, I've been running this for about 5 years. I'm actually on the $49 a month one because I've got team members and lots of quotes going on. Actually, no, on the 29, sorry. I reduced it down because I only have the one team member now. So in Quotient, and I'll log into mine. So you can actually see what it looks like under the hood. So here's some things I've been doing. So I've done some draft ones over here for different things. I've got, you know, things that I've got out there that are awaiting acceptance, and then I've got my accepted ones down here. It gives me some things over here, lets me know, okay, here's all the, you know, the money that should be coming in. So as you see, I've actually been putting a lot less quotes out recently because I'm trying to actually reduce the amount of work that's coming in at the moment. And I've got messages up here from people who I've just currently got quotes out for. So this quote has been resent out to that particular client. So they can actually message you on the quotes, which is a great way to be able to keep in touch with things. So let's just say I'm doing this paid social media campaign. Emily won't mind that I see it. I've got then each thing that I'm doing. And then I've got pricing that's in part of it. So this sales funnel is all in there. It's I haven't really updated this yet one, so I need to resend that out, but it's a bad example. So it's these things are optional. So if I go, if this is a optional item and the price is one at, say, I don't know, 3-stage Instagram funnel, it's going to be it's going to be a variable price. So what it is, that's not something for them to get as an option. This is something which they actually have to, there's different stages over a different part of the process. So this is what they're going to get. I've got here the things that they can choose. So they can go stage 1 at that price, stage 2 at this. So I go, yes, it's an option. It's been selected. Now it adds up the costs down the bottom. If I take that option out, then it's got 0. So they choose what their options are. This tells them what they're going to get. This is where they choose the option they want. There we go. So I can choose that option and then adds it up to $594. So then they've got that in place. So you can make your options also subscriptions. So for instance, if you want to have $39 a month subscription cost, you can quote that as well. And it will show them it's $39 a month for 12 months if that's what they're going for. So the subscription cost in here per 1 month for, say, 12 months is going to be $1,220. Then you see $120 over here. We've got one lot of that per 12 months, or we want to go, actually, we're going to go, the price is going to be $120 and the quantity is going to be, maybe they're going to get 2 of these because they've got 2 businesses they want to build this for. Select the option and then it says, okay, it's going to be $264 per month for 12 months. I've also then included all my what you need to know stuff down here. So I've got all the things like cancellation policy, where I'm located at, upon acceptance of the quote, here's what's required to be paid up front. All the little terms and conditions are in there. So in this particular one, I'm going to content out of there. It's very, very clear how it all works, and it's really nice to work with. Most of my quotes go through here now. Not all of them, but most of them go through here. The second one I want to show you is Proposify. Proposify has a free starting rate, and it does actually have a free layer that allows you to be a sole trader, not require a credit card, have the trial, and just work on maybe 5 documents at one time, which means you can only have 5 quotes out at one time. So 5 active documents means you can only have 5 active quotes. Once you've got one which is accepted, you can delete that and go and create another one. Obviously, in my case, I've often got more than 5 quotes out. I might have, up to 60 quotes out in the market at any one time. So in that case, that wouldn't work for me. But this could probably work for you. So I'm going to log into my account with this, my free account that's currently on trial, using my LastPass to log in. And in here, a lot of setup stuff. So I haven't done any setting up in this account, but I can go over to the left to see what I'm going to do. My content library will be where I've got lots of things like photos and videos I want to include in my proposals. You've got templates. Now I've got no templates in here, but there is a starter template, or I can see a gallery of templates that other people have used for their proposals and quotes. So once it brings it up, you can see proposals for accounting. Now, these are all made to be quite beautiful. They're made to be quotes, but they're a lot more beautiful and a lot more intense in what they're producing. They're just going to look really great when you send them through to someone. So they're a bit more in depth than what you normally be. So this is an e-commerce one. You can go in and see, an employment contract. So these guys don't just do quotes and proposals. They do estimates. They do event management proposals. They do employment contracts. They'll do e-commerce plans. So it does a lot more in there. But remember, you can only use 5 of these at a time. What you're probably going to be doing is going to, say, your pipeline and creating a document. So creating a document, I'm going to get started. So I'm going to use the starter template. Yeah, I'll use that. So in the starter template, you might want to put in your brand, put in your logo or something. I'm going to skip that for now and go straight to the template. So the starter template is for a proposal or a quote. So it's going to be one of both. Sometimes you'll call it a proposal, sometimes a quote. It's taking a bit of time to get going. My internet's sort of going to crash, or this is a very slow system. But it's putting together that template so we can start working on it. As we work on that template, it is taking a long time. I've a sip of my water, running out of time, so I'm hoping it doesn't take too much longer. So we've also got to show you which one is probably my favorite of my quoting systems. Almost there. Here we go, and it's loading. So I've got a cover that I can replace the image on. I can put my logo in there, have what the name of the proposal is, add things like signatures. It's got a lot of design elements to it, which is going to make this really fun to work with. It is a fun system, and I think it is great for putting together really long proposals. At the same time, though, you don't need all these pages. You can just jump out a page and say, no, don't need that page. Don't need an intro page. Get rid of that. What else do I need? Overview. No, I don't need the service. Maybe I need the services. Any problem with this system? It is rather slow. It is really slow. So I'm going to skip down the service and go, these are the services we offer. Great. And now here is what essentially is the quote part. So you can update any of these with whatever you want. So in there, we've got the brand identity. We can type in over the top of that. You can have variables such as sizes, different, pretty much variables can be anything you like. So this, while it is beautiful and while it is very comprehensive, it's also a lot more complex than what most quotes need to be. This is more like you're producing a very big proposal for a very expensive piece of work. And honestly, I haven't started using this myself simply because it is so slow and cumbersome to work with. I just don't have the time for this. Beautiful thing is it has digital signatures built in. So you can have digital signatures so people can just click on it and then it gets sent back to you in a signed status. So that's pretty much what Proposify is like. The other one I want to show you is Quoters. Quoters is the cheapest one on here for the paid stuff, $4.90 US a month. It is enough for you to be able to go. Now, I've got a bit more stuff. I've got things like my branding pack on there. So because this is something I've got for a lifetime deal from AppSumo, which is a place to get lifetime deals on different kinds of software. You can go yearly and it'll give you a bit of a discount, but $4.90 down to $4.08 isn't a huge discount. Going to log in, quickly show you around what it looks like. So you've got a bit of an idea of where you're going with this particular system. So when Quoters opens up and I sign into it, logging in, so it's got me to create a new one, or I've got other ones that I've created here already. So for instance, I look at this one, which is for a digital marketing strategic plan and training for the iconic deck chair cinema. I'm able to create a really beautiful proposal as well. So for instance, it's got all this extra stuff in. I've colored it to match their colors. I've created down here all the things I need to put in. So I click on that. I can update any one of these, make them optional if I want to, add in discounts if I want to. So this is actually my favorite system because it's got all the ability to customize, but it doesn't have the complication that Proposify has. In here, I've got those extra pieces of information, what my payment detail expectations are, what my timeline is going to be, the people I'm going to work with who's going to be part of my team, then my company information down the bottom. This produces then a website that you'll find at this address. So I copy in this address and they'll go online and they'll be able to view this online as a website. So it looks really nice for them to read through, really simple. They can work with it. They can easily like add in their options if they need to. They can see how much everything's going to cost and they can see all the terms and conditions. But better still, you can download the PDF and view it as a PDF and it comes out as a beautiful document. So I'm going to open this document within the PDF reader within this tool. So let's just go here and open up in here. You can see it. So now it's producing this. So there's the photo I had. It's laying it out quite nicely. It then varies in different colors for the pages like it does on the website part of it. Here's all the itemized information on a page, 2 pages, and then the stuff they need to know, as well as the company information. So it produces a nice document that they can print out and read as well. So you might want to fiddle around with it to make things fit a bit better, but honestly, just the fact that it even does this is going to stick you out head and shoulders above a lot of the other proposals and quotes you're going to get. Replace that word proposal with quote, and it's pretty much the same thing. Remember, it's got the information about, I just added this as this is part of the conversation we had. So acknowledging that I've listened to what they had to say, saying that this is what I'd like to do for them. So explaining the services I'm looking at providing, then the quote, and then that. So in all this, when they read this online, they can actually click on here to accept that quote. So once they accept that, it goes into the system, shows me it's accepted, sends me an email, and then I'm there. So it's a great little system. I think setting up a new quote, this all like you set up templates, all that kind of thing as well. And you can have as many quotes in there as you would absolutely like to have. You can also connect it through to different things like Xero. If you want to send them off to the quotes that appear in Xero, so you can easily turn them into invoices as well. I don't really go to that much trouble because I set up my own invoices anyway, and I don't really have a volume of them coming in that requires me to do a lot of automations just yet. Maybe in the future, but not just yet. So let's get back to our presentation and get through the end of it, where we're going to find out what you can do next with this. If you'd like to do more, we're looking into things like LinkedIn, Facebook, proposals, quotes, anything you like. You can participate in the Digital Solutions program. If you haven't already, 3 hours of one-to-one with myself or any of the other amazing advisors that we've got on board. $44 gets you that 3 hours, 3 one-hour sessions. Plus you get access to as many workshops and webinars as you like. It doesn't have to be 4 hours, just do as many as you like. You can register for this if you haven't already at businessstation.com.au. Feel free to reach out to me. I love to chat with people. So LinkedIn is the best place to find me. I'm definitely more active on there than any other social media. Overall, though, I'd like to thank you for taking some time out of your business this evening or this afternoon or this morning, if you're on the other side of the planet, to work on your business, not just in your business, because we know that's vital for keeping a business healthy and helping you with your learning and your development as well. Thank you. And I hope to see you in the next one of these videos. Good night.